Hey guys, welcome to the Daily Word Bible Study, a plain and simple book by book, chapter by chapter, and verse by verse study through the entire Bible. We are in Matthew chapter 22. So we're going to I pose the question, who is Jesus marrying? So I can say, and where is his wedding taking place? Now, of course, this is widely known as the marriage of the Lamb. In eschatology, a lot of people have the scenario that let's say there's one view of eschatology where people have that um, Jesus is going to rapture the church, and then he's going to rapture the church, and then we're going to go back to heaven for 7 years. So during the 7 year tribulation period, there's going to be a wedding feast, okay? A wedding feast. So we're going to go back to heaven, and then for 7 years we're going to have a wedding feast. All right. So that's one view, okay? That's one view of eschatology, or the idea that when we talk about the marriage of the of Jesus, but again, what I want to kind of pose is, who is Jesus marrying? And that's and as we get into this study, I think it's important to understand context, verbiage, language, because let me just say this. As you read Revelations, I have not found that there is going to be this marriage of the supper of the Lamb in heaven. In other words, the rapture happens. And by the way, I do believe in a pre-tribulation rapture. What I am saying is that I don't know if the pre-tribulation rapture, what happens after. The Bible does not tell us what happens after, other than the fact that wherever Jesus is, we're going to be there. Now, when you read in Revelations, and I may go there in a moment, but as far as the events that people have, the events of things that people have in terms of eschatology. So they would believe that the rapture happened. Now, there's some people that believe that the rapture of the church will happen to the end of the tribulation period, and then there's some other views on eschatology that I'm not going to get into them. I do get into them on the Friday night Bible study. We're going through a deep dive into eschatology. So a lot of this, what I'm glossing over here, I am talking about it on the Friday night study. Okay, where we're going really, really deep in there. What I want to kind of focus on here is, so like, why I don't, well, put it like this. Here's why I don't think that the sequence of events would be the rapture of the church is going to happen. We're going to go back to heaven, and we're going to have this wedding feast. And then after the wedding feast, we're going to return with Jesus to conquer the beast and all of that. And I'm going to tell you one reason why I don't believe that what's called the wedding of the Lamb to the church. Okay, the wedding of the Lamb to the church is because during the 7 year tribulation period, Jesus is executing judgment. So when you start with the seal judgments, trumpet judgment, the bowl judgment, Jesus is the one that's unleashing this. So again, like I say, that's as far as I want to go with it. But so, and still to ask the question then, who is Jesus answering? Wedding. So let's get into it. Matthew 24, 20. Oh, jumping all over the place here. Matthew 22. Now, so if you remember, Jesus has been talking about the kingdom. And remember, we said that when you have to understand Old Testament language in order to really properly understand the prophecies of the New Testament. So, for example, the vineyard. Okay, so what did God mean by vineyard? And so we showed last time that what God meant by vineyard, and I can show you this quickly right here if it comes up, in Isaiah 5. Like I say, I like this app. By the way, let's see if I can show you the name of it. I don't know what it's called, but it's not showing me here. But anyway, I can just look up words or scriptures. So vineyard, and then this is just one, and that shows you the use. And in Isaiah 5:7, he says, "For the vineyard of the Lord of hosts is the house of Israel, and the men of Judah his pleasant plant." Now, the reason why I'm showing you this is because when we get to as Jesus, is now giving these parables, and then he's using this language, we understand this language in the context that it is given. So the vineyard is the house of Israel. All right. And I say that too because it is not the church. As we are going through, for example, Jesus meeting, and when we get to Matthew 24, I'll do a little more explanation on that. But Jesus is not talking about the New Testament church here in any of these parables. Okay, so you have to keep this in the context of Israel. He's speaking to Israel, the nation of Israel. So verse 22, verse 1 says, "Once more Jesus spoke to them in parables. The kingdom of heaven may be compared to a king who gave a wedding banquet for his son." So again, let's stop for a moment. Who is the son, right? And now he says he's giving a wedding banquet for his son. So he goes on and he says, he sent out his slaves to summon those invited to the banquet, but they didn't want to come. Again, he sent out other slaves and said, "Tell those who are invited, look, I've prepared my dinner, my oxen and fattened cattle has been slaughtered, and everything is ready. Come to the wedding banquet." But they paid no attention and went away to his own farm, and another to his business. And the others seized his slaves, treated them outrageously, and killed them. And the king was enraged. So he sent out his troops and destroyed those murderers and burned down their city. Now, let's kind of go back and say, well, who is he talking about? And what is he talking about? In other words, is he talking about like the Christian church? The answer is no. Because think about this. Keep this in context of Israel, and then keep this in context that in the gospel message, Jesus is not going to what? Destroy people for not coming to the wedding. And notice this is the wedding. This is not salvation he's talking about. It's the wedding. All right, so verse 8 says, "Then he told his slaves, the banquet is ready, but those who were invited were not worthy." Now, why were they not worthy? Because they didn't come. "Therefore go where the roads exit in the city and invite everyone you find to the banquet." So those slaves went out on the roads and gathered everyone they found, both good and evil. And the wedding banquet was filled with guests. But when the king came to view the guests, he saw a man there who was not dressed for the wedding. So he said to him, "Friend, how did you get in here without wedding clothes?" And the man was speechless. And the king told the attendants, "Tie him up, hand and foot, and throw him to the outer darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth, for many are invited, but few chosen." So what does this statement mean here? If you stop and think about it, many are invited, but few chosen. So then you have to ask the question, on what basis then are they chosen? And then why are they invited? In other words, notice in the case that he gives here, the reason for the rejection is because of something that they did not do, like obey. So for example, the first crowd were destroyed because they did not come to the wedding. The man that didn't have proper wedding clothes was thrown out because what? He didn't dress right, okay? But he goes on, he says, many are invited, but few are chosen. Does it mean here when he says chosen, on again, who are the ones that are chosen? Those who responded to his invitation. But again, this has to be interpreted in light of Israel. God dealing with the nation of Israel, not how Jesus redeemed us on the cross. I always say that the descriptions, it's very important to pay attention to the descriptions. Don't insert and think that he's talking about like the gospel message here. Okay, the context is in God's dealing with the nation of Israel when he comes back for his kingdom. Now, more of that we'll get more than that as we get into chapters 23 and 24. Verse 15 says, then the Pharisees went and plotted how to trap him by what he said. They sent his disciples to him with the Herodians. Teacher, they said, we know that you are truthful and teach truthfully the way of God. You defer to no one. You don't show partiality. Tell us, therefore, what do you think? Is it lawful to pay taxes to Caesar or not? Now, obviously, we know this is a setup question. What's kind of interesting is, and I want to elaborate on this here. But let me go on and read this. I'm gonna finish reading this. I want to come back and kind of elaborate. He says, but perceiving their malice, Jesus says, why are you testing me, hypocrites? He calls them out, right? He says, show me the coin used for the tax. So they brought him a denarius. Now remember, a denarius was a day's wage, okay? We would if we compare something more like an hourly wage, but kind of more because of the day wage. And this is always good. Here's the day's wage to pay. He says, whose image and inscription is this? He asked them. Caesar's, they said to him. And he said to them, therefore give back to Caesar the things that are Caesar, and to God the things that are God's. And when they heard this, they were amazed, so they left him and went away. Now, what's kind of amazing about this is the Pharisees, remember, you had the ruling body of Israel under Rome. Okay, so you had a puppet government that was Herod. And the religious rulers, which made up of the Sanhedrin, part of the group was, you had the scribes, you had the Pharisees, excuse me, the Pharisees, and then you had the Sadducees, and there was a couple of other groups. The Pharisees were considered the most pious. In other words, if you lived in that day, you might have said, those are the holy men of God. The way they dressed, the way they prayed. Of course, Jesus blasted them. And then wait till we get to chapter 23. That entire chapter is devoted to just blasting the Pharisees for their hypocrisy. But they didn't know the law. They knew the law. It was said of some Pharisees could cite entire sections of the Old Testament law. They devoted themselves to that, which makes their sin even greater. And you can see their hypocrisy here, that they had the outward appearance of holiness, but the reality, they were running game. And when Jesus come along, he exposed their hypocrisy. he exposed their game. And we're going to see this later, that as you see, they're trying to trap him, which is interesting because they're not interested in truth. They're not interested into the ways of God. They have a singular purpose. Let's destroy our enemy, Jesus. Why? Because he's messing up our game. And no one would kind of question the Pharisees until Jesus came, probably the exception of John the Baptist. Now, what was funny is that they didn't like John, but at the same time, they kind of respected John. But Jesus, they hated. They hated Jesus because he was turning people away from them. Now, what's interesting that then, so now in their hypocrisy, their true evil nature is constantly being exposed, constantly shown. And so notice he says they plotted with the Herodians. Now, the Herodians were those who came from Herod, the King Herod. And King Herod was a political office that was set up by Rome. And in both cases, their job was to keep Israel in line. No riots, keep paying their taxes. And if they did that, Rome didn't bother them. And partly why the Pharisees were worried about Jesus and turning people away is that they didn't want the Romans to come and say, we're going to, you're not keeping the people in check, so they're going to come in with a heavy hand and things could go bad. So Herod was a wicked kingdom or dynasty. His father, Herod, King Herod, this is, he was actually the one that built the temple, the first temple, that at the time was still in building for 42 years. He built that. And when he died, then his you can say his province, his kingdom, was divided into between his sons. So one of these sons was Herod. You can say Herod Jr., but they didn't call him Herod Jr. And then there were the other sons. They were divided up. So the Herodians, then, this was more the political side, and then you had the Pharisees, which were more the religious side. But notice that the Pharisees probably despised the Herodians because Herod was a wicked person. He was the one, remember, that he had married his brother's wife, and then the wife's daughter, right, which could be either his niece or step-niece, danced this lewd dance and so elicit lust from Herod that he said, I'll give you whatever you want up to half my kingdom. So prompted by her mother, she said, give me John the Baptist, because she had been looking for a reason to get rid of. She was trying to get Herod to kill John the Baptist because he was prophesying against him. He was, your marriage to your brother is sinful. She hated that, and then she was the cause that Herod, ordered the execution of John the Baptist. Now watch it. So the Pharisees, who are supposed to be so holy, they're teaming up with the Herodians. They're teaming up with people they don't even like just to get Jesus. We see this in politics today. You can ask the question, why evangelical Christians are teaming up with Trump? What is their end goal? Because it's certainly not to build the kingdom of God. They don't care about the kingdom of God. So whatever twisted hope they have, That's why you see the evangelicals teaming up with Trump. Okay? There's nothing that he's doing that would kind of align with their values, so-called values. Because we can see, so the same thing with the Pharisees right here. There was nothing about the Herodians that aligned with their values according to the standards of the law. But notice how they teamed up together. How they teamed up together to destroy Jesus. All right, we'll pick this up in the next study. We're not through, of course, but it is amazing. And that's it. We see the same thing today. We see the same thing today. How religious people, it just shows just how religious they are. They have nothing to do with it. I'm going to talk nationalists, Christian nationalists. They're not about building the kingdom of God. All right. Don't forget to like and share this video and subscribe to BP the Bible Perspective. And as always, if you have a thought or comment, add it to the comment section below. All comments are welcome. I'll see you in the next study.